Vice President Harris is headed to battleground Georgia tomorrow, where she is expected to highlight the stories of two Georgia women who suffered preventable abortion care related deaths. The tragic stories of Amber Thurman and Candy Miller are highlighted this week in an investigation by ProPublica. Thurman was a single mother who died of complications from taking abortion pills. She had to wait 20 hours to be approved for a surgery that had been banned that summer in 2022, with few exceptions. Now, Miller was a mother of three who died at home, declining medical care when she also suffered complications from abortion pills because she feared the state's abortion ban. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli. And Mike, we've seen the vice president lean heavily into reproductive rights in her campaign. How are these stories going to be part of the vice president's visit and message tomorrow in Georgia and beyond?
Well, Georgia's Republican governor, Brian Kemp, is disputing the idea that that state's abortion restrictions were responsible for these two women's deaths. But that's contradicted, according to this ProPublica reporting. It really is incredible reporting by an independent board of medical experts in that state that did say that these deaths were preventable. In one of these cases of Candy Miller, she was afraid of seeking the kind of care she needed because of the abortion laws in the state and the fear that she would be prosecuted. And so in a campaign in which we tend to talk about these issues in the abstract at a very high level, the vice president is going to travel to Georgia to lift up these specific cases, to draw attention to them, to try to call back to that really important moment during her debate with former President Trump when she said this is not something that people asked for, that this is something that people are very much suffering the consequences of across the country. We have seen, even before she became the Democratic nominee, how much the reproductive rights portfolio was at the top of the vice president's agenda. She traveled often to Georgia to talk about these kinds of cases. And this is a change in the vice president's schedule from the beginning of the week to capitalize, really to draw attention to these stories in real time because they think it's such a powerful illustration of a major voting issue.
Mike Memoli, thank you very much. And joining us now, University of California Davis law professor, an expert on the law, history, and politics of reproduction, Mary Ziegler. Mary, how do these stories of these two women in Georgia and others help form a legal path forward for fighting abortion bans?
Well, we know from other nations that sometimes it takes actual deaths to motivate people to see the need for repeal. Something similar happened in Ireland after a young woman died when her care was delayed because physicians feared violating the nation's then abortion ban. So I think it remains to be seen whether these stories also change the outcome of the election, for example, or give a new impetus to reform the law. We're seeing Governor Kemp and anti-abortion groups denying that these deaths even are attributable to abortion bans. So I think we'll continue to see that being contested.
But again, as Mike just pointed out, the investigation from ProPublica stemmed from this independent board, the State Maternal Mortality Review Committee, and their findings. Are these types of committees all over the country, and how much power do they have when it comes to reproductive rights?
Well, these committees don't have a lot of power when it comes to reproductive rights. That's, of course, in the hands both of largely of legislators, to some degree of state Supreme Courts. And so these medical review boards often are coming in only on the back end to designate these deaths as preventable and connect them to abortion bans. But then it really, I think, is up to voters to hold people in positions of power to change the law, to say that they want that to happen, right? To insist that the law do better to protect their lives and health.
With medication abortion specifically apparently involved in these two cases out of Georgia, what impact could this have as we see legal challenges to the FDA approval of abortion pills like mifepristone? Of course, one case already made it to the Supreme Court last term, but they didn't actually rule on the merits.
Yeah, that litigation is continuing. We're seeing a number of conservative states trying to step in the shoes of the plaintiffs who were told they didn't have standing to sue and argue that they too can bring challenges to the FDA's approval of mifepristone. If Donald Trump is elected, we're likely to see challenges to mifepristone access rooted in the Comstock Act, which is a 19th century obscenity law. Cutting off access to these pills has been a focal point for the anti-abortion movement, which is unsurprisingly using these deaths to argue that the bans had nothing to do with it, contrary to the findings of the state medical board. It was actually mifepristone. So the way to fix the problem, they're arguing, is to just criminalize abortion everywhere, as opposed to just in the states it's already banned.
one thing we've heard from Republicans, in fact, during the debate, Trump pushed forward this lie about post-birth abortions, which is just murder in all states. So what's your reaction to the GOP continuing to suggest this is the Democratic position?
It's honestly a little bit puzzling. I think it's puzzling in part because U.S. laws punishing the killing of newborns are harsher than those in most parts of the world, including peer nations in Europe. It's puzzling because Republicans themselves campaigned for and successfully passed a law in 2002 deeming infants born alive after abortion, to the extent that happens at all, persons with rights under the law. So this has always been sort of a solution in search of a problem. I think it just goes to show that Republicans don't really know how to talk about the abortion issue at all. I think they're often better served by talking less about it rather than arguing that their opponents are extremists. It's especially hard because Trump himself often wants to refuse to answer questions about whether he'll take extreme positions like vetoing a national abortion ban.
Mary Ziegler, I appreciate your perspective and all the research that you've done and shedding light on this conversation. Thank you.